GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the first two segments because we're going to take a little bit of a break from the NFL for a little bit and transition to the world of college football. A lot of you guys have seemed to like these college football segments. I love college football myself, and I especially love the world of fantasy college football, as all these players are really stepping up in certain situations. A lot of big games, a lot of big conference games, a lot on the line for a lot of different teams. So, therefore, a lot of different fantasy stars that I could have picked this week. But I compiled a nice little list for you guys. So let me know what you think about this list in the comments after I'm done. But without further ado, let's jump into some of my college football fantasy stars of the week. Let's start off with one quarterback. And this was a guy who a lot of people were very low on after that first game against Georgia. This was a guy who had the weight of expectation on his shoulders, being a Clemson quarterback who, after generational talent, was there for them in the late to mid 2010s. And then DJ, that whole situation, and now him. A lot of pressure was put onto his shoulders to kind of lead a new renaissance, a new beginning for a team that seemed very stuck in his ways. And after the Georgia game, a lot of people were left wanting. But over the past couple of weeks, as he's gotten a little bit into ACC play, he's really been one of, if not the best quarterback over this 2-week stretch in all of college football. So I have to give my flowers to Cade Klubnik for really stepping up and being a quarterback who Clemson can rely upon again. Because at the start of the season, it certainly felt like Clemson was in for a rough season. But Cade Klubnik, kudos to him for turning it around. I hope he sustains it for the rest of the season because Clemson could be a sneaky ACC contender. It seems like one of the more wide open conferences in college football. So look for Clemson to stay in and around the ACC race, and we'll all be down to Cade Klubnik against NC State. Very important conference game. 16 of 24, 209 yards, 3 TDs, 33.4 fantasy points for Cade Klubnik. And I don't necessarily know if this is going to continue, but it is very telling, right? Because when you look at Clemson and you look at the way they build, they're heavily insistent on keeping players in their system and not cherry picking from other schools through the NIL and transfer portal. So Cade Klubnik was kind of forced to live with what he has. He's been doing it very effectively. Now, I don't know, in the ACC, which is one of the biggest kind of NIL profit-making conferences in terms of the schools they have and the lure that they bring, I'm not sure if this kind of identity will be able to stick for that long. But if, they can beat a team like NC State, even though they're kind of slowly falling down the ranks in the ACC, then it's a perfect litmus test for the future for Clemson. It's certainly brighter than some teams in the ACC, and who knows, maybe if, them and Florida State do leave the ACC, Cade Klubnik's play will eventually appeal to other conferences in terms of acquiring them for their conference, because that was the situation Clemson was in. If, they continued struggling, they would not have become appealing to other conferences should they have wanted to leave the ACC, which them and Florida State desired to do. So Cade Klubnik could be an X factor, not just in terms of the season for Clemson, but the future for Clemson and the horizons they want to reach. But let's go to a running back. And this guy, transfer, came into Ohio State, one of the most hyped transfers of his class. One guy who really could change the profile of this Ohio State team, and that is Quinshon Judkins. And I was really looking for him to have a big performance in these first couple of weeks, because I still think Travion Henderson was, quote-unquote, the guy for them. But Quinshon Judkins had a very impressive performance against Marshall. 14 carries, 173 yards, 2 TDs, 31.7 fantasy points. So kudos to him. I think this partnership is going to be very dangerous down the stretch for Ohio State. Because looking at all the teams they play Michigan and Oregon, and those are perhaps the only two tough teams left on the schedule. So the fact that they have two physical running backs where they can kind of beat Michigan at their own game, and then going into Autzen Stadium on the road against Oregon down the road, it's going to be very pivotal and integral to have guys that you can trust not just in the receiving game, because they have one of if not the best receiving core in college football, but to have in the ground game. That's very vital, because I'm still kind of out a little bit on Will Howard. I'm a little skeptical of what he's going to look like against those big teams. So it's going to be very important for the ground game to kind of complement nicely what the receiving game is doing right now. So kudos to Quinshon Judkins for stepping up. And then another quarterback, again, from the Big Ten. This is a guy who also had a lot of questions coming into the season, but under new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, this offense really feels rejuvenated and ready to take on the Big Ten, potentially clinch a CFP spot, and that is Drew Aller. This young man, from where he was last season, where he was just kind of in damage control, not wanting to turn the ball over, not very ambitious in how far to the football on the field, really throwing the ball well to all levels of the field, incorporating so many different receivers, whether it be redshirt freshmen, experienced receivers. He's doing it all. 17 for 21, 309 yards, 3 TDs for this young man. So I just wanted to shout out Drew Aller for the progression he's made, the maturity he showed in leading a very hopeful Penn State team in Big Ten play. And they look very ready to take on the big boys in that conference. And another running back. This is a guy who had kind of big shoes to fill in this Missouri offense, replacing, Cody Schrader, a very legendary Missouri running back who will never be forgotten there. But Nate Noel really stepping up. And I really like the profile of the Missouri team. Yes, it was a very sketchy win over Vanderbilt, needing double overtime, needing a missed field goal to win that game. But Nate Noel might have been the reason that they pulled it out. And it just goes to show that on any given Saturday, you might need someone different to carry the load for you. 24 carries, 199 yards, 22.2 fantasy points. And on a day where perhaps the Cook-Burton connection for Missouri was not hitting, Nate Noel really stepped up. And that just goes to show how versatile they can be on the offensive side of the football. Eli Drinkwitz doing a great job keeping this offense on schedule. Maybe the defense is going to be tested because they don't have Chop Robinson anymore. But at the end of the day, a win is a win for Missouri, and Nate Noel was perhaps the biggest part of it in keeping them on schedule in a very loaded SEC is going to be integral going forward. Then another running back. Speaking of Big Ten running backs, let's talk about Khalil Mullings. This guy really shocked me in how he performed, not just this week, but this entirety of the start of the season, because I thought that Donovan Edwards was going to be the guy, right? Very kind of complementary style running back where he is up for an explosive play in a game, but he keeps you on schedule. He's more physical, I guess. Whereas Khalil Mullings brings a lot of speed and explosiveness. That's what he brought in this game, but he also was very timely for this offense. This was a very vintage Michigan performance. They got back to what they did best. Having a quarterback who just protected the football, Alex Orji, and Khalil Mullings just did the rest. 17 carries, 159 yards, 2 TDs, including a game-winning touchdown, 28.3 fantasy points for him. So overall, if you are a Michigan fan, you should be very happy with this performance because it got back to what you guys know. It got back to having a dominant run game, being able to go down the field in a must-win situation and just pound the rock and just run after run after run, knowing that you're out physicaling your opponent. And kudos to USC, though, for playing a tough game, but in the big house, statement win early on in Big Ten play for Michigan. They should be very, very impressed with themselves. And the last guy I want to point out, another Big Ten guy, very Big Ten heavy kind of fantasy stars of the week list here. Omari Evans, I believe he's a young freshman out of Penn State. Big in terms of how he's stepping up for Penn State in the passing game, because that was what they were lacking. They were lacking a passing game, Penn State. They knew they had two of the best running backs in the country in Singleton and Allen, but they needed passing game. And this guy, Omari Evans, 4 receptions, 116 yards, 1 touchdown, 19.6 fantasy points. Just really impressive. Whether it be him, Harrison Wallace in the pass game for Penn State over these past couple of weeks, they really stepped up. And Andy Kotelnicki should get a lot of credit for helping this offense look more explosive. And I'm really excited to see what the Big Ten is going to look like, because out of all these players, a lot of Big Ten names in a lot of different places, a lot of players who feel like they can make an impact on the stretch in terms of competing for that CFP title. But overall, let me know what you think in the comments. Who was your fantasy college football star of the weekend? I have a lot. I could have had a lot more. There were definitely a lot of interesting games, but at the end of the day, these are the guys who I thought really impressed me. And it's telling that they're in the Big Ten, because that conference is going to be crazy in the coming weeks. But let me know what you think. Coming up after a quick break, though, we're going to be looking at the NFL fantasy stars of the week. The guys who really impressed me have continued to impress me over these past couple of weeks with their play. So we'll be right back after this short break to talk about that.